AITA for reporting my coworker for something she didn't do, because it was the only way to save the company. I still think about the sound the printer made that morning. The slow, rhythmic hum of pages sliding out one after another, like the heartbeat of an office that didn't know it was about to stop breathing. Funny how memory works, how it latches onto the smallest, most meaningless details, as if they might explain what came after. I've worked at the same company for almost 8 years. A mid-sized design agency, the kind of place that feels too small to be corporate, but too big to feel personal. I started there as a junior analyst, quiet, invisible, grateful. Over time, I climbed the ranks, learning to blend competence with silence, the two skills that mattered most in a place like ours. By the time everything fell apart, I was a senior project manager, responsible for client accounts worth more money than I'd ever seen in my life. I liked the structure of my job, the precision of deadlines, the illusion of control. It kept the chaos of the outside world at bay. Then there was Harper. She joined 2 years ago, a data coordinator with a degree from some fancy university and a confidence that immediately filled every room she entered. Harper was the kind of person people noticed, not because she was loud, but because she was sure. She asked questions that made people uncomfortable, not out of arrogance, but curiosity. She cared about the work in a way that made the rest of us seem mechanical. We became friends in that cautious, workplace way, coffee breaks, shared complaints about upper management, quiet laughter in late meetings. I liked her. Everyone did. She was efficient, kind, and more transparent than anyone I'd ever worked with. She believed the company could be better, that rules could bend for the right reasons. And maybe that's why it all started to fall apart. The first cracks showed up in a quarterly report, numbers that didn't add up. Nothing dramatic, just small discrepancies in billing and vendor invoices. I noticed it late one evening when I was checking client statements before submitting them. A few $100s here, 1,000 there. Easy to miss, but impossible to ignore once seen. At first, I thought it was human error. Then I realized it wasn't random. The inconsistencies all pointed to the same internal account, one Harper managed. I remember sitting there, staring at the spreadsheet, the glow of the monitor making my coffee look colder than it was. The rational part of me knew I should flag it immediately. But the human part, the part that still remembered Harper bringing me soup when I had the flu, hesitated. The next morning, I rechecked the files. The errors were still there. And worse, they were growing. I spent the next week digging quietly, trying to make sense of it. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself I was protecting her, or maybe protecting what I believed about her. But the deeper I went, the harder it became to explain what I was seeing. Vendor payments routed through third-party accounts, purchase orders that didn't match approved budgets, line items that disappeared and reappeared like ghosts. I confronted her once, gently, almost cowardly. I asked if she'd noticed any strange issues in the finance logs. She looked genuinely confused, promised to double-check. She didn't look like someone hiding anything. But guilt is a performance, and I'd seen enough of it in my years there to know how convincing it can be. Then came the audit. Corporate sent an external team to review the books after one of our clients raised questions about overbilling. It was supposed to be routine. It wasn't. Within days, rumors started spreading that something big was wrong, that someone was going to take the fall. The tension in the office became a living thing. People spoke in whispers, avoided eye contact, stayed late just to prove they had nothing to hide. The night before the auditor's final report, our director called me into his office. He was calm in that terrifying corporate way, polite, measured, rehearsed. He told me they'd traced the discrepancies to Harper's department. He said her access logs matched the changes, that the client losses could be catastrophic. Then he looked at me and said, "We need someone to verify this before it becomes official. Someone reliable." That word reliable has a way of turning people into cowards. He gave me the file. I went home that night and opened it, reading line after line of data that seemed to confirm what I already feared. The system logs, the transfer timestamps, the IP matches, all of it pointed to Harper. But something didn't feel right. It was too neat. Too perfect. Mistakes that lined up just enough to look intentional. I'd seen Harper's work for years. She was meticulous. This didn't look like her. I stayed up until 3 a.m., rechecking every file. And then I found one vendor entry tied to a ghost account, but with an approval timestamp that didn't match her working hours. It matched mine. At first, I thought it was an error. Then I realized the approval ID wasn't her login, it was mine. I froze. My chest went tight, the kind of pressure that makes your vision narrow. Because that meant either someone was using my credentials, or someone was setting her up. And if someone was setting her up, I knew exactly who had the power to do it. Our director. He had full access. He'd been the one pressuring us to cut corners on billing, to inflate hours for reporting consistency. I'd always suspected he was moving money around to protect his bonuses, but I never had proof. Now he was building it, proof against Harper. I sat there staring at the screen, the weight of it pressing on me like a hand around my throat. I could expose him. I could go to HR, to corporate, tell them everything. But if I did, it wouldn't just be him. The entire department would crumble. Clients would leave. People, good people, would lose their jobs. And Harper? She'd never work again. Even if she was innocent, the stain of investigation never really washes off. I wish I could say I was brave. That I exposed him, defended her, did the right thing. But that's not what happened. The next morning, I walked into the audit meeting and said exactly what they wanted me to say. That yes, I had verified the discrepancies. That yes, Harper had access. That yes, it all lined up. The director smiled at me like a man congratulating his reflection. Harper was fired the next day. For the first few weeks after Harper's termination, the office felt like a hospital waiting room, sterile, quiet, pretending to be fine. Her desk sat empty for a while before HR cleared it out. They left behind her potted plant, a crooked little succulent that leaned toward the window, still alive but struggling. No one wanted to touch it. The official announcement framed it as a compliance breach and internal restructuring. Everyone knew what that meant. People lowered their voices when they said her name. The company moved on in the way companies do, quickly, cleanly, like wiping chalk from a board. I tried to do the same. At first, I convinced myself I'd done what was necessary. That it wasn't my fault. That saving the company meant saving jobs, hundreds of people who relied on those paychecks, families who never knew how close they came to losing everything. I told myself Harper would find another position somewhere else, start over. She was talented, smart. She'd survive. But guilt has a way of leaking through even the tightest logic. It started small, a twist in my stomach every time someone mentioned her name, a moment of hesitation before opening an email from the director. Then it grew into something constant. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. The spreadsheet templates she'd designed. The folders labeled in her neat, looping handwriting. The coffee mug she'd left behind, now sitting forgotten in the break room cabinet. The worst part was how normal everything became. The audits ended. The client stayed. The director was praised for his leadership through crisis. A bonus rumor floated around. I wanted to throw up every time someone said his name. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office, trying to catch up on reports. The cleaning crew had already left. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound. I opened an old archive folder, looking for a reference document, and accidentally clicked into a restricted file I didn't recognize, Legacy Transactions/Q2 Adjustment Logs. It required elevated permissions to open. My hands shook when I entered my credentials. I shouldn't have had access, but somehow it let me in. Inside was a list of adjustments, numbers and dates that didn't make sense. Vendor codes I'd never seen before. Amounts that matched the discrepancies from the audit. Each entry marked as corrected. Each signed off by the director. My heart started pounding. He hadn't even bothered to hide it well. He'd covered his tracks just enough for the investigation, but not enough to erase the evidence completely. And the worst part? One of those corrected transactions matched the one that had used my ID. He'd used both of us, her as the scapegoat, me as the shield. I closed the file, logged out, and sat there for a long time staring at the blank wall. I could have copied it, printed it, done something. But I didn't. I just shut my laptop and went home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Harper's face, not angry, not accusing, just confused, the way she looked during the audit meeting when they told her what she'd supposedly done. She had glanced at me once, eyes wide, like she was asking me silently to explain, to save her. I hadn't met her gaze. For weeks afterward, I half expected her to reach out, to call, to ask why. She didn't. Instead, I heard through the grapevine that she'd left the city, moved back in with her parents in Vermont. I imagined her in a quiet house, sitting at a kitchen table, trying to rewrite her life from scratch while mine went on untouched. The guilt began to show up in strange ways. I forgot things, deadlines, birthdays, appointments. My emails grew shorter, colder. I stopped laughing at office jokes. The director started noticing. He'd pat my shoulder and say things like, "You did the hard thing. Don't lose sleep over it." But I did. One evening, I stayed late again. I'd gotten used to the emptiness of the office at night, the illusion that if I worked hard enough, maybe I could earn back some invisible debt. I found myself standing by Harper's old desk, staring at that dying succulent. The leaves had gone soft at the base, turning yellow, but there was still a stubborn hint of green at the tip. I watered it. It felt ridiculous, a useless, symbolic gesture, but it made me feel slightly less monstrous. That was when I realized I was alone in the building. Or at least, I thought I was until I heard a sound behind me. It was the director. He was standing by the door, watching. "Still here?" he asked. "Just finishing up," I said. My voice sounded small. He nodded toward the plant. "You don't need to keep that thing around. Bad memories. We're moving forward." I didn't answer. He smiled, thin, cold. "You're loyal. I like that." Then he walked away, the sound of his shoes fading down the hall. That word again, loyal. It had gotten me everything I had, and now it was the thing I hated most about myself. That night, I deleted every personal file from my work laptop and started printing copies of everything related to the audit, invoices, email threads, the adjustment logs. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending. The papers stacked up on my kitchen table, a physical monument to every moral compromise I'd made. I stared at them for hours, trying to convince myself to act, to send them somewhere, corporate, the press, anywhere. But fear is a patient thing. It waits. It whispers. It tells you that maybe silence is safer. That maybe she wouldn't want your pity. That maybe truth won't fix anything, it'll only destroy what's left. So I waited. And in that waiting, the guilt began to eat through me like acid. Winter came early that year, the kind that made the city sound hollow. Every morning I walked to work with my collar pulled up, watching my breath cloud in the air, thinking about the stack of papers hidden in the bottom drawer of my desk at home. I told myself I'd throw them away every weekend. I never did. The office moved on easily. A new coordinator replaced Harper, a bright graduate who smiled too much and asked too many questions. The director paraded her around like a trophy. "Fresh start," he said. He liked new things. They hadn't learned how to see him yet. I thought I could live quietly inside the lie. For a while, I almost managed it. But guilt doesn't stay still. It grows legs. It follows you to lunch, into meetings, into your dreams. It began showing up in small ways. I couldn't stand to open spreadsheets. I flinched whenever someone mentioned audits. My heart raced every time the director said my name. I started drinking more coffee, then wine at night, then both. I convinced myself it helped me sleep. The breaking point came in January. The new coordinator, her name was Elise, strangely enough, stopped by my office one evening. Everyone else had gone home. She stood in the doorway, nervous, holding a folder. "Something's wrong with the vendor reports," she said. "I think there's duplication." I felt cold all over. She laid the pages on my desk. It was happening again, the same irregularities, the same phantom accounts. The same pattern the director had used before. I told her I'd take care of it, sent her home early, then locked my door. For hours I stared at the numbers, the familiar mess of falsified data repeating itself like a bad dream. He was doing it again, building another ghost to feed the machine. And if I stayed quiet, I'd be part of it again. That night I didn't go home. I sat in the parking lot until dawn, engine off, Fingers numb, trying to decide who I was going to be. The sun came up pale and cold, and I knew the decision had already been made. I was too tired to lie anymore. The next day, I went to see the director. He was in his office, as always, calm and immaculate. I closed the door behind me and said, "It's happening again." He didn't even look surprised. Just smiled faintly, the way people do when they've already rehearsed your reaction. "You worry too much," he said. "These are standard adjustments." "You're fabricating them," I said. My voice shook. "You're using employee IDs again." "Hers." "Mine." He sighed like a parent dealing with a difficult child. "You did a good job last time. Don't ruin it now. You know how many people keep their jobs because of the way I balance the books." I wanted to shout, but the sound caught in my throat. He leaned back in his chair. "You think anyone will believe you? After you verified the first report? You're already in this, remember?" And he was right. Every signature, every verification, every late-night email tied me to him. If the truth came out, I wouldn't be a whistleblower, I'd be an accomplice. I left his office shaking. My vision blurred on the way down the hallway. People passed me, smiling, asking about deadlines, oblivious. I went straight home and opened the drawer with the papers. There were hundreds now, proof of everything. Proof that could destroy him, and me along with him. I sat on the floor surrounded by pages, trying to imagine what Harper would say if she saw me like this. Would she hate me? Pity me? Maybe both. She'd always believed in right and wrong as if they were separate rooms. I'd spent my whole life in the hallway between them. That night, I wrote a letter, not to Harper, not to the director, but to the company's ethics office. I attached scanned copies of everything and scheduled the email to send the next morning. My finger hovered over the keyboard for a long time before clicking schedule. When it was done, I poured a drink and sat by the window watching the snow fall, half expecting sirens to start right then. They didn't. The next morning, I went to work as usual. People chatted about weekend plans. The smell of burnt coffee filled the air. Then, around 10, everything went quiet. HR walked past my office followed by two men in suits I didn't recognize. The director's door closed behind them. Half an hour later, he was escorted out carrying a box. No one spoke to me directly, but everyone looked. By noon, the whispers started. By 2, an email went out from corporate thanking an anonymous employee for bringing a serious compliance issue to light. No one ever asked who it was. But everyone knew. That evening, I stayed late again, sitting at my desk long after the lights dimmed. The office felt heavier than ever, a battlefield after the smoke clears. I walked to Harper's old corner, the one that still smelled faintly of coffee and hand lotion, and looked at the window where her plant had once sat. It was gone now, replaced by someone else's family photo. I thought of calling her. I even searched her name online, found a small design studio in Vermont with her listed as an employee. There was a photo, her, smiling, sunlight in her hair, the same confidence I remembered. I closed the browser without saving it. I'd done the right thing, technically. But the right thing didn't feel clean. It felt like standing in an empty room after an explosion, counting who was left and realizing you're one of them. For a few days the office buzzed like a beehive kicked open. Everyone whispered, theories blooming faster than facts. HR held meetings behind closed doors. Emails from corporate arrived written in cautious, bloodless language. They called it internal realignment. We called it what it was, damage control. The director's name disappeared from the website by the end of the week. No farewell notice, no explanation. Just gone. People celebrated quietly, extra pastries in the break room, an undercurrent of relief, but nobody asked why or how. Companies like ours survive by forgetting fast. I should have felt vindicated. I didn't. They promoted me interim head of project compliance. The title looked impressive on paper, but every time I signed an email with it, I thought about Harper. I thought about how that same signature once erased her career. The audit committee wanted interviews with everyone. I told them what they wanted to hear, how the system failures had gone unnoticed, how controls would be improved. They thanked me for my integrity. Integrity. That word made my stomach turn. Outside of work, my world shrank. Friends invited me out, and I said I was tired. I told myself I was protecting my peace, but really, I didn't want to talk about any of it. I couldn't bear the possibility that someone might call me brave. Sleep was the worst. I'd lie in the dark hearing the faint mechanical hum of that office printer over and over. Pages sliding out one by one, proof, reports, accusations. I'd wake with my hands clenched, nails dug into my palms. Spring came slowly, gray snow melting into gray rain. The company stabilized. New leadership arrived. People pretended they'd always known something was wrong. I kept my head down, quietly efficient, reliable as ever. One evening, months after everything ended, I opened my email and saw her name again. Harper. It wasn't from her exactly, it was a newsletter from that Vermont studio I'd seen online. Somehow I'd been added to their mailing list. Her name sat neatly in the footer, Operations Director. There was a small photo of their latest community project, bright murals painted on a library wall. She looked happy. Whole. I stared at that image until the screen dimmed. Then I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and realized my hands were shaking. I wanted to tell her what had happened. That the truth came out. That the man who ruined her was gone. But what would that change? It wouldn't give her those lost months back, the job, the confidence. And it wouldn't absolve me. The story of her downfall still had my fingerprints all over it. So I didn't write. I just watched the newsletter come every month, each one proof that she'd survived without my apology. At work, people began treating me differently, more deference, more distance. Success isolates you. They thought I'd been the one who saved them, when really I'd only delayed the collapse. The systems that allowed him to cheat were still there, just renamed, repackaged. The machine always finds new gears. One night I stayed late again, though I had no reason to. The building was empty except for the low hum of the vending machine and the reflection of city lights on the windows. I walked through the rows of desks until I reached the one that had been hers. A new employee sat there now, cheerful post-it notes stuck along the monitor. I touched the edge of the desk, then the window glass, cold against my palm. For the first time in months, I whispered her name. Just once. It disappeared into the air like a secret too tired to matter. Later, as I locked up, I realized something strange. I wasn't hoping for forgiveness anymore. I just wanted to learn how to live without needing it. A year has passed since the investigation ended. If you walked into our office now, you'd never know what happened. The walls have been repainted, the leadership posters replaced with new slogans about transparency and teamwork. People smile again, easily, as if pretending long enough makes it true. I still work there. I've thought about leaving hundreds of times, but every time I pack my desk in my imagination, I remember that walking away doesn't erase what I did. Leaving might even feel like running, and I've run enough already. So I stay. I do my job well. I train new employees, review their reports, teach them to double-check figures, to question inconsistencies. They call me meticulous. I suppose I am. Every corrected spreadsheet feels like a small act of penance. I still receive Harper's newsletters. I never unsubscribed. They arrive like quiet postcards from another life, photos of smiling volunteers, workshops, bright walls covered in children's paint. Her company has grown. She writes about community, resilience, rebuilding. She never mentions what happened before, not even in the subtext. It's as if that version of her died somewhere I can't reach. Sometimes I imagine writing to her. Not to confess, she doesn't need that burden, but to thank her. For showing me what integrity looked like before I buried mine under ambition and fear. I compose the message in my head every few months, simple and clean, I'm glad you're okay. Then I delete it before it exists. Some apologies don't belong to the person you hurt, they belong to the version of yourself you betrayed. Last month the board offered me the permanent director position. The same title he once had. I told them I needed time to think. They looked surprised, almost offended. People spend their whole careers waiting for that promotion. But I kept seeing his office in my mind, the polished desk, the quiet manipulation, the way power softened his voice until it sounded reasonable. I thought about how easily I'd mirrored him when the pressure came. I realized the job itself wasn't dangerous. What it demanded from me was. I declined. Officially, I said I wanted a better work-life balance. Unofficially, I wanted distance from the person I'd been. I moved to a smaller apartment across town. It's quiet there, too quiet some nights. I cook, read, go for long walks. I keep no souvenirs from the office except one, Harper's old succulent. It's still alive, improbably. I repotted it months ago, trimmed the yellowed edges, gave it more light. It sits on my windowsill now, green and patient. A small, ordinary thing that refused to die. Sometimes I catch myself talking to it, telling it about the day. Maybe because it's the only witness left that knows everything. People assume the truth will set you free, but it doesn't. It just rearranges the cage. Freedom, I've learned, comes later, quietly, not with fanfare or forgiveness, but with acceptance. The kind that doesn't erase guilt, just makes space for it. There are mornings now when I wake before my alarm, the first light bleeding through the blinds, and for a few seconds I feel weightless. Then memory settles back in, soft but steady. And I think maybe this is what atonement really looks like, not a grand gesture, but a lifetime of choosing better. I don't know if Harper ever thinks about me. I hope not. I hope her peace is uninterrupted. But sometimes, when I water the plant, I whisper into the quiet, I'm sorry, not because I need her to hear it, but because I need to keep saying it. It's the only prayer I still believe in. The printer still hums in my dreams sometimes. The sound doesn't scare me anymore. It just reminds me that truth, like paper, always leaves an impression. You can stack it, file it, hide it, but the mark stays, faint and permanent, even after the ink fades. And maybe that's enough. Not redemption. Not forgiveness. Just the quiet understanding that we all live with our choices, and sometimes surviving them is the most honest thing we ever do.